Hello, my name is Sydney. My group mates are Aaliyah, Christina, Francisco, Isaac, Ash, and Jillian. For our project, we will be discussing the ethical dilemmas of Grey's Anatomy's Episode 6, Season 2, Into You Like a Train. In this episode, the hospital team has a surge of patients from a train wreck that was carrying over 300 passengers. The hospital is overwhelmed by the arrival of the victims, and the doctors can only tend to so many patients at once. A case that we would like to talk about for the project is the case of two patients that are impaled by one pole. Due to the severity of the injury and the placement of the pole, the surgery team has to make the decision of who to save amongst the two victims. Let's hear what Aaliyah, Christina, and Ash have to say about this matter.
Well, this episode was an absolute mess from the very beginning, but I guess that's on par with all Grey's Anatomy episodes.
There's honestly so much that you could really talk about within this episode that went on. It really is crazy.
You were talking about one thing earlier, Leah, about the very beginning of the clip. Didn't they just finish off a 30-hour shift or something?
Yeah, so I know right at the beginning of the episode, they had talked about working a 30-hour shift. And then, the opening scene starts off with them in a bar having a few beverages. And then this whole train wreck occurred. So now they're being called in. And that in itself is really a lot you can say from that.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
it's also pretty wild because one of the doctors were still a little in their beverage zone, so they kind of had to keep an eye on her too. So that was also a pretty crazy part of the episode.
Mm-hmm.
However, that is not what we are here to discuss.
Yes, yes. So I know we talked about it, really just kind of unpacking the clip. You have these two individuals who are basically been punctured by this pole, and now the doctors are talking about really whose life to save.
Is there any way to operate without separating them?
No.
If we move the pole, then
They'll both bleed out.
You have Dr. Burke, who's really just saying this patient should be slid off the pole, being that they have
It's
less.
the female patient,
Yeah.
right, Leah? Okay.
Yeah, the female patient, she has more of this, she's in more critical condition, and the male patient, he has a better chance of being saved. So really you should slide her off and really try and save him. But then you have, remind me his name, Dr. Shepard.
Uh-huh.
Dr. Shepard's then makes a good arguing point where it's well, one could say that shouldn't you go for trying to save her, considering she's in more critical condition?
Then we can hold the pole steady in the other one. Move it very slowly and repair the damage as we go.
who? Which would you move?
With her aortic injuries, her chances of survival are extremely slim no matter what we do. But if we move her, we have a real shot at saving him.
Well, I could argue, since her injuries are more extensive, we should move him.
What are your guys' thoughts on it?
Horrible. My immediate thought too is well, why do we just have to have the one option of sliding her off? Can't they just cut the pole so that way they're still connected to the pole and it's preventing them from bleeding out? But now you have some more room, to work around that. If that makes sense.
Another thing to take into consideration is these people did not know each other until this pole impaled the both of them together.
Yeah.
That's pretty intense for them to go through that and then just be stuck together and have this whole situation revolve around them and have doctors surrounding them and telling them all this information of, oh, this might happen. It's just a lot to go through.
Well, totally. And that makes me think about there's a clip that's later on in the episode that basically the doctors made up their mind that they are going to let the woman die, and they are going to put their efforts into saving the male patient. And I think there's like so many ethical questions that that come up from that. Like one, like they didn't consult the patients on what they wanted. Another thing is like, is it in her best interest to tell her that she's going to die? Like that's very definitive. I mean, like, what if she doesn't die? And also, like, what about him? If I was in his shoes, I would not want to know that this other person was dying on behalf of me. And now I have to live knowing that. Like, no, thank you.
I know it really was a lot. And I think too, like, I mean, you brought up a fair point, like, how come they didn't really, I guess, discuss the situation with them more? It was kind of like when they approached them with it, like, this was the decision.
Right.
Mhm.
Also, in reality, wouldn't there be two medical teams? I would think.
That's my
There's two patients, right? So why is there one medical team for the two of them?
That
Mhm.
or like alternatives later down the line too. It's like they just make it seem like it's in stone of what they're going to do of, oh, we can't do this and we can't do that, but we can do this.
Exactly.
It
It's
seems
such
like
a binary.
they're boxing themselves in, but then again, I don't really know how these situations really go in real time, you know.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So as far as like different ways of how we would handle it, we already talked about like separating the patients further a little bit, so that way they can saw the pole in between them. Is there anything else that you guys think?
Oh. I was thinking too, like, well, there's that, but then I was also thinking too when we were talking about like the decision making as well. Sorry. But like when we're talking about that, I was even thinking about like how they mentioned in like in some of the clips that the family was notified that they were at the hospital, but why wasn't anyone of them notified about the decision being made?
Right.
Mhm.
So I feel like
Agreed.
that's also something too.
Absolutely.
Mhm. Yeah, that's definitely vital information that families should know.
And then
Also, like ideally bringing it to an ethics committee so that way there's a more robust conversation about how to move forward and what's right, because I mean like going back to the beginning of the episode, like Dr. Burke had a good point. Like I think that he's valid in thinking, okay, we should focus our efforts on saving the person who has the best odds. But then also Dr. Shepard has an equally valid point about like, well, we need to take care of her as well. She's more critical, so why don't we focus our efforts on her? So I don't know. I think you need a third party to help mediate.
help make
That
those decisions.
and I feel like later down the line, let's say if they were to be in this situation again, to take into consideration what tools they have, like they should definitely look into, oh, maybe we should get a saw that would suit this type of situation rather than just stick to the tools that they have. They should always be stay up to date with tools that could help out in any situation.
Yeah.
Because you can't tell me that there's not other option of tools that could have worked.
Thank you, Aaliyah, Christina, and Ash for your input on how they chose who gets to get the surgery or not. Now let's hear Isaac's, Cisco's, and Jill's thoughts about how the surgery went.
So in this part of the clip right here, essentially, we saw her aorta's already shredded up. They tell him, other patient is losing blood pressure. They're starting to flatline. Everybody leaves. Obviously, there's a lot wrong with this situation. Let's go ahead and go around, just talk about kind of what we think is wrong. You want to start us off, Isaac?
I think the first thing that stuck out to me is that it seemed like there weren't that many like surgeons and doctors in the actual operating room. Because I know they were working on like they were doing surgery on each person in different groups, but it just seemed like, you know, there could have been more people around to have like a good number working on Bonnie, the girl, as there was working on Tom, the guy. So I feel like there could have been more people around.
That makes sense. What do you think, Jill?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Isaac. I feel like they should have asked around like the surrounding areas of other hospitals if they knew they had two patients that were in critical condition, if they had attendings there that could come for like an emergency surgery to help both of these patients. It just seems like the doctor that said her aorta was shredded kind of just gave up right after that. Like there was no hope for her.
I mean, I agree with both of you. In all honesty, like I know the show does it for drama, but I really feel like they could have had another surgeon in the room,
Mhm.
or even the fact that they all kind of walked away was an issue in my opinion, because it's very obvious that they could have kept somebody else there to kind of keep her stable as much as possible. The fact that they kind of just gave up really shows that they didn't have the opinion that she was going to make it and just chose to let her die,
Yeah.
which I think is wrong in this kind of situation.
I think it's also worth noting, like, right after they leave Bonnie and go to do surgery on Tom, Meredith, who you see like right there, she's saying like we can't leave her because we have an obligation to like, stay with her and not abandon her, which, is like a pretty good reminder of the fact that, they're like, even though it's difficult, they should just like do their best to try and save their life instead of just like leaving at the first sign of trouble, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, it just makes me question and wonder like why do they all of a sudden get to determine when her life isn't worth saving anymore almost.
Yeah. And as we're watching the clip itself, I mean, this could just be bad acting, but I kind of noticed in the background we have a bunch of nurses kind of just playing with like the gowns and stuff in the background. I think in a real life situation, all of those people could have helped out. Instead, Meredith's kindly the only person trying. And I think that when Dr. Bailey came over to pronounce her dead, it was less of the fact that she was dead and more she just wanted Meredith to stop trying and save her.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like Dr. Bailey was like, we can't waste time on this patient when there's another patient that we have to attend to, which I mean, I agree that there's a certain hands that need to be on another patient, but there was like, as you like see in the clip, there was about like 8 people already there. Why couldn't have there been maybe like 3 or 4 trying to also save the other patient, Bonnie?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. So the next question I would like to pose to you guys, and we'll probably end up asking the class as well afterwards. What would you guys have done differently in this situation? I mean, as OTs, we won't be in this situation, hopefully, but in this situation, what would you guys have done differently?
I mean, it's hard to say because, like, obviously, that's like a very high pressure environment. And personally, I don't do well under pressure. So I don't think I would have like been able to clearly talk about what's the best way to like figure this whole situation out. If I was there, I honestly, I wouldn't know because like it's just hard to imagine like if there was someone dying or someone just there in front of me and someone told me that we should just leave them because we can focus on another person to save their life, and that would just be like a lot for me to take in. So I don't know what I would do personally.
Mm-hmm.
I think from my standpoint, there should have been at least one other surgeon trying to repair her aorta and at least try to like save her life to the fullest, because I feel like as surgeons and in this show, they say that they're going to do everything they can to save a patient, and they didn't in this sense. Dr. Burke felt her aorta, said it was shredded, and immediately left. Like, where was the motivation to actually try and save her? I feel like someone could have tried to save her, tried to like do CPR once or twice, and then if it's still not working, her blood pressure is still dropping, then pronounce her dead. But everyone just upped and left right away.
100%. In all honesty, this might sound like a cop out, but in my opinion, I feel like the situation, I wouldn't be in the situation because if it comes down to having to choose between one or the other, I think I would do my best to make sure that one of the other patients wasn't even in the same room. They had their own team in a separate operating room
Mhm.
because I know that this kind of situation right here, essentially, they weren't prepared to take on two patients at the same time. And there was probably another hospital somewhere that could have helped out, if not just another operating room. Like it's a whole hospital. I'm sure there were plenty of other surgeons who could have helped out. Even though there was a disaster, not everybody's in the same kind of life-threatening situation. But yeah, that's essentially my opinion on it. Thank you guys for sharing yours. I think the question we really have now that you guys can go ahead and answer, but we're also going to pose to the class is, do you think ethically anybody really has the choice of we're going to let one person die to save another? And if that's the case, what are you going to use to determine which one dies?
Like, how would we determine
Like,
who
do
lives
you
and who
think it's
dies?
right for them to pick one person to die to save another person?
I don't think that the doctors should have been the determinant of who gets to live and die because they all have their different specialties, you know, like one's always going to be like, oh, the heart is more important. Oh, like the like neuro is more important. That should ultimately be up to the ethical team, if there is one at that hospital, to decide what the best route is for both of those patients and not just the outcome for one patient.
Yeah, I like what Jill was saying about having an ethical team because especially in a situation like this, I think having an ethical team would be like a pretty vital part to have instead of leaving it up to the team that will be doing surgery on both of them. Because like I think they'll have time to figure out like what exactly the procedure will be, but then the ethical team can like take time of their own and like talk it over and you know just try and figure it out as best they can. I think so.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I mean, an ethical team, that's what they're there for, right? Is to make these kinds of decisions. That's what they're trained for. And I think this kind of goes back into the idea of this being a God complex for the doctors. They save people's lives so much that I think for them it starts to become second nature that they could choose whose
Mhm.
life they're saving.
Mhm.